Well, I would like to thank once again the organizers for inviting me to this extraordinary event, and I would like to make use of the time to speak about things that have become important to me while dealing with open dialogue in the last 13 years, and especially occupied me since the time I started to teach open dialogue in Poland in 2013. It's been a very intense time of learning for me as well, and that's one of the important things I had to learn and understand, how teaching also can only work sustainably if it's about mutual learning. Mutual learning in the field or context where it happens, and as those who learn are influenced by their surrounding, the teacher is as well, and gets interested in several things himself while teaching. And the biggest chance in being invited to have a talk is that I can reflect on what I did all these years, and I can reflect more on what I say, or what's me, who am I? I learn a lot about that. And this is always a chance, and I take it as a present to do this, to be able to do this, to reflect on what I do and what I decide to talk about. What I learned, what stayed with me during the last years are some quotes I came across, and this is surely not complete, but it's some of the things I had to think about and I had to make up my mind about. And the first one, or let's say these quotes brought me to widen the scope, to understand that we're not just psychotherapists, we're not just in a therapeutic system, but we're all part of a wider society. And we're all kind of citizens who take part in developments we sometimes don't see, but other people can see them. And so I came across, and it was my special interest to learn more from sociologists or people who call themselves social philosophers. And one of them is Zygmunt Bauman, which I read with great interest, and I liked it very much. And I know you can read, but the translator can't, so I have to read it as well. A good society is a society which believes that it's not good enough, that it's the task of the collective or the collectivity to insure individuals against individually suffered misfortune, and that the quality of society is measured by the quality of life of its weakest, just like the carrying power of a bridge is measured by its weakest pillar. This quote has a lot of a Christian heritage, resembling sentences from the Sermon on the Mount in the Bible, or in Germany, it's been a psychiatrist, Klaus Dörner, who, as a person, reminded us of the necessity to care for those who really need it. And then we have the CRPD in Europe, as a contract from United Nations declares inclusion of the weakest as one of the main goals we should try to achieve. The second quote is from another sociologist, and it describes something that's happening around us. Okay, this. And it's about the late modern society produces singularities. It does no longer aim at the general, standardized, and average solely, but promotes and expects uniqueness. Things, individuals, events, places, and communities, everything wants to be special. The result is a competition of attention and evaluation for the status of this uniqueness, the so-called singularity. The results, there are winners and losers. And there's a slogan here in the hotel that caught my attention that says, make the ordinary special or extraordinary. And this is something I've been thinking about. What does this mean? What does this mean for a society if we want to be so exceptional? What is this need behind that? Another quote. Okay. Well.
This one?
Yeah, I know. I did, but it wouldn't work. Well, I quote it from here. Okay. So it's from another sociologist who was thinking about what's happening in society. What are the changes? Where does the wind of change blow to? And he says, the quality of human life is not measurable in currency as resources, options, or lucky moments. We have to look at our relations to the things in this world that shape our lives, and they are stable and safe when they resonate with us. And this idea of the necessity of the human being of resonance goes through a thick book, and he thinks a lot about the importance of that, and he combines it, for example, with the use of smartphones and how this spread, how everybody, is anybody in the room who has no smartphone yet? One, two. Okay, but this is, he understands this as this device has a possibility to provide what we all might need in all kinds of moments to have a spontaneous resonance. You know, you text and you get something back. So this is another thing, the resonance. And then I would like to quote again. Zygmunt Bauman, who it's a very short one. He said, real dialogue is not about talking to people who think the same as you do. And you can think about that, but in times where there's biases in perceptions, where there's different groups in societies, this could be the hardest part, especially at a time when society is on the brink of splitting up in directions that seem to be contradictory or irreconcilable. Like, for example, in the debates about LGBT refugees or migrants. And you can jump to the next slide. And it's a quote from Jaco that I heard very early. One more. Yeah. Which stayed with me and which I like to repeat, sometimes like a mantra. That it's about meeting people is also about respecting otherness in the present moment, which is a very condensed way of saying what it is about. And the other thing is, what I heard from him, I thought more about is everything you say is important. So, what? Yes, help me, please. So, what is this about? Why did I show all this? And in all these quotes, there's a lot of the values we share. To take care of others, to respect singularities or otherness, the need for safe and trustful relations, and I almost, when thinking about these things, I almost forgot one thing to say, which has become also important for me to deal more with, and this is about freedom. What does freedom mean? And I grew up with a song from Chris Christopherson who was saying, freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. And then other people, I don't know from whom this quote is, but he said, freedom is always the freedom of the other person. And then there's Trieste. And the Basalia quote about freedom is therapeutical. And there's a lot to work through, and through myself, through my own thoughts. What is it? How do I offer freedom for other people? How important is this? So this is a lot of quotes, a lot of ideas that accompanied me through. But the title of my talk is also reaching hand across borders, but also talking to neighbors. And I think you heard a lot by now, and I would like you just to take 5 minutes to talk to your neighbor about what did you hear by now. You know this, talking to neighbors. You all have a neighbor. Please take 5 minutes time to talk about what did you hear by now? What did this do to you? What did this move inside of you? If you could come to a stop. You can continue the conversation if you want later, maybe. But I would like to thank you for cooperating this way. And I want to say some more few words about what all of this did mean in the field I had been moving into. And at that time, as a beginner in matters of teaching, I had a kind of a tendency to know what might be the right way to teach or what might be the right things to teach. Now, in mingling with another culture and another history and another social organization, I realized that this has an important impact on the way to learn together from each other. The main lesson I had to learn from the participants was our daily work in the field of psychotherapy and clinical psychiatry is already a hard one. Please don't make it more difficult for us. Don't teach us things making it more difficult for us to live with discrepancies in our daily tasks. This message made me want even more to offer them just examples of my experience that might be of use for them. Meanwhile, I know more about what they can make use of, as they told me. So, teaching is not about following a set of ideas put into a schedule, but it means for me to adapt learning to the needs of the participants or students in their special surroundings. Dealing with history and societal developments broadened my view on open dialogue as a special form of psychotherapy in the way that this approach, and I would say like every approach, is embedded in broader streams of societal thinking and progress or regress that you could call changes, as well as we usually tend to see. To understand the most of what we do and how we do it affords to deal with knowledge from other scientific fields as natural science or psychology, ethnology, ontology, philosophy, and sociology. This can help to stay humble and get closer to perform something called the art of not knowing. One of the core assumptions of our approach to provide access to something called dialogue. So what happened to all the efforts to teach and implement open dialogue in Poland? A lot of enthusiasm, and not just Regina's, but also skepticism, many people eager to learn for themselves, others more reluctant in a more biting position, some people following their own initiative, others being sent by the institutions or organizations. There were peers and relatives within the groups. Some big surprises. How could this go together well? And it has been amazing. After a first training course in Warsaw in 2013, other courses were soon offered in Warsaw and Krakow. The movement spread. National days for OD were created, a foundation came to existence, and whoever got to know Regina might get a notion what happens when she creates new ideas. This open day during the international meeting is a part of the movement, besides the European-funded Power Project and many other fruitful activities. And all this only in 6 years. This is also something I learned, that if you start to talk about open dialogue and then later think about implementing, it takes much more time than I ever had thought before. But this is also something just I had to learn to accept. And it's much more easier if you can cope with that it just takes time. Because it's me that needs the time to change. Other things made me proud as well. Starting the education, I guess all of us trainers had once the idea that open dialogue would have to be implemented in a way similar to the structures in Tornio. Then I heard several voices claiming that will just not be possible to do because of the way that the therapeutic system is paid by different agencies at different ministries. Me too. I underestimated the forces behind the money that might prevent change. But I underestimated also the energy and enthusiasm, the ingenuity and creativity of some participants to apply for grants and conduct some projects to apply some of the rules of ODA, And nowadays I call this the program of small steps. At first I had this thought, what's the use of these activities in the long run? But then I realized that it might be very useful to keep up the motivation of those who are on the path. And it might, as a grassroots movement, be necessary to spread the news within the population, fostering a rising request for ODA in the country. I also learned that it all takes more time than we ever expected, but now I know and I do understand better. So I am standing here thankful and enriched and still willing to contribute, maybe not so much towards a success, as it's more and harder for me to define what that might mean, but to the movement, which is still very lively. So I'm ending with the thankful thoughts for the driving forces and to all the contributors I had the chance to meet and work with. Regina, all my co-trainers, and all those participants who dared to take a road less traveled. This is something, a quote from Robert Frost. And I came across, and to understand this idea, that Tom Anderson had been in Vermont, where Robert Frost had lived. And there's a poem from Robert Frost talking about, well, how much courage it takes the road less traveled. And so I think we're on a road less traveled. And that brings me to another idea, that how much pleasure it can be to start a journey where the map ends. Thank you for listening.